I'm delighted to welcome today Dr. Rajendra Sharma as our guest on Metaconscious Leaders. Dr. Sharma qualified in medicine in 1984 and is registered with the GMC, is CQC certified and registered as a consultant in complementary medicine. His special interest is in treating those with chronic diseases and the underlying cause of illness. He works predominantly with those with conditions that do not respond sufficiently to conventional therapy. This includes IBS and inflammatory bowel disease, hormonal and thyroid issues, CFS and ME, chronic infections, mental health, and those battling cancer. He focuses on optimizing health through nutritional and non-drug medicine. As a past secretary and education moderator of the British Society for Ecological Medicine, he's involved in ecological health screening and natural therapies and treatments. Dr. Sharma is the author of The Family Encyclopedia of Health and Live Longer, Live Younger. He's done many other things in his life, including a 10-year stint with the regional BBC radio, and has appeared extensively on panels and TV. Those who sing their praises of Dr. Sharma include the late, great Tina Turner, Debbie Moore, the founder of Pineapple Dance Studio and fashion chain, the BAFTA-winning movie director and screenwriter David Leland, and a range of celebrities, including supermodel Mary Helvin and Spice Girl Mel C, as well as actors Hayley and Alice Kreisch. So, welcome, Rajendra, to Metaconscious Leaders.
That's very kind of you to have me on, Greg. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're most welcome. And we've been waiting a little while for this conversation. Delighted to be here and having this opportunity. Rajendra, you've been practicing as a doctor and in healthcare for 35 years. How did you come to be treading this path? And what inspired you to combine Eastern and Western influences in your medical practice?
The biggest influence was my father. I was born into a family with lots of Indian faces and lots of white faces staring down at me, with dad from India, my mum a blue-eyed blonde from Kensington. I was brought up very much with a world of alternative views. And so when my father switched from having first qualified in dentistry, then going through medicine, working as a surgeon, because he felt that most medicine was geared towards symptomatic relief rather than getting to the root cause, and surgery often offers a cure. He then found himself now being in England, because part of his earlier career was in India. He decided that he was going to set up bringing back into play his Ayurvedic and homeopathic upbringing. So from my young age, I saw this broad mix of cultures, I saw this broad mix of medical concepts, and I never really thought of them as very different. So I don't think we have conventional medicine and functional medicine and Ayurvedic medicine. We have medicine, and it should be much more focused towards healing, because that's how I saw it from when I started. I think beyond that, the second biggest influence was my first year in the NHS, where I just thought, okay, this really can't be the way forward. I keep seeing the same people coming back week in, week out in whatever department I was at. And some tragedies occurred. When I brought up one particular case, I remember, of a gentleman who had terrible asthma and came in every Friday night. So when I was on call on Fridays, there he was. And I forget his name. It was Jim. Come on, what's happening? And I sat down and talked to him. And every Friday he treated himself to a large bar of chocolate. And it was his treat with him and his wife. And he was in his, 60s, 70s. And every week, and I brought this up at an M&M meeting, mortality and morbidity meeting, which every hospital still has, just looking at what's going on. And the room went silent when I said, I think this man's got an allergy to chocolate or something within it. So, no, that's nothing to do with respiratory medicine, not a lot to do with any of the other consultants that were in there. So that was that. And unfortunately, I was there when he died. Still gets me. So that was a big one. And then my dad's death didn't help after that, because, didn't help. Of course, it wouldn't have helped, didn't help me, but it certainly helped my practice, because I turned his practice, which had been going for 20 years, and he had a high clientele and was one of the first functional medicine doctors in the country to have a medical degree and step forward and say, I think this might be the way. And then eventually I built up a team to compensate for my lack of knowledge as a young doctor. And from that, it grew. And I ended up running the largest collective of alternative practitioners in the UK, probably in Europe. And then that went on to a secondary interest in diagnostics, and the second clinic being the diagnostic clinic. So those are the major stepping points to my interest in not just being a drug pusher and looking a little bit deeper.
And the group of the group of practitioners that you referred to there, was that the Hale Clinic?
Well, when I joined the Hale Clinic at the invitation of Theresa Hale, there were many, many practitioners there, and some of them I forged relationships with some of them. Others I actually brought in from my previous practice that I'd grown over the 4 years before I joined that clinic. So I consider at the time there were about 60 that I worked with or knew of or learnt from.
Okay.
And that allowed me to write my encyclopedia, because there were so many things that could be done for so many different conditions. So that interplay between different people and having an open mind made the predominant difference.
Yeah. How would you explain your holistic approach then, integrating conventional and complementary medicine, to someone who's used to conventional approaches?
Yeah, it's a constant battle. I'm in my mid-60s now, and I've had a lot of friends. I've met a lot of friends along the way, and many of them have nothing at all to do with medicine. I'm the local quack, until they have a problem that can't be resolved. And it's at that point they go, yeah, all this stuff that you've been talking about for 5, 10, 25, 30 years, can we just have a little chat about it? And at that point, you start to try the edging towards this concept of a holistic approach, because unfortunately the drug doesn't seem to work, or the condition isn't responding to conventional treatments, and they are being told, well, we don't know what it is and we're not quite sure what to do. And that list of complaints that you mentioned, they're all labels, really. IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, is a great one, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia. In honesty, what happens is a patient walks in, gives a list of conditions, we turn it into Greek or Latin, put it back to the patient in that foreign language, and they think they have a diagnosis. But actually all we've done is turn fibromyalgia, fibrofibers, myo, muscle, algia, pain into exactly what they told us they had. They may be a bit more specific. It hurts here and it hurts there. And we go, yes. And we do all the tests and we don't find anything wrong, because, of course, we don't perhaps go as far to look at normal function as opposed to pathology. So if we can find an infection, if we see the white blood cells are raised, well, we give an antibiotic. If somebody's drunk too much alcohol, they're toxic. Okay, well, we know then what we might be dealing with. But when we don't see the body reacting, that is one of two things. One is the body is incapable of reacting, or the condition is not showing itself to the body to allow the body to react. So things like chronic infections, chronic toxicity. So these are, when I start explaining this to the individual, even the most skeptic goes, oh, well, I'd never thought of that, or I didn't look down that avenue. So I have a broad analogy, and that is of a tree. So people will have a hand thrust in their face in my consulting room online. It's covering the camera, but I'll use this one. But very simply, these are all the symptoms. These are all the problems that people will complain of. The trunk of the tree is where those symptoms are sprouting from. Logical. Something hurts. Well, there's something going on in the body. If something's not working in the body. And that's an important differentiation. But when you think about what goes to all the different branches, the bloodstream, the nervous system, The lymphatic system comes away from it. The venous system comes away from it. But these 4 areas are either taking things to or not taking things to, or they are sending information to and receiving information back. And we go up here and we send the gastroenterologist up with their scopes and peppermint capsules if they're holistically minded, or drugs to take out spasm, Buscopan. We send people to the skin specialist, to the rheumatologist, to the X, Y, and Z specialist up here, without much concern for those 4 other factors. And if somebody's got a thyroid issue, they could end up with 5 or 6 different consultants looking at why their heart is slow, why their metabolism is slow, why their skin is dry, why their nervous system is either too shaky or too sluggish, why their muscles are aching. And we all know this. We knew this at medical school. The body is tied in, but medicine is so geared towards looking at the specialism. And we end up with this array who are then hopefully going to communicate with each other, and except they often don't. And that may well be because they don't recognize it, because they're so funny. The more experience you get in the field, the less you will remember of what you just haven't seen for 20 years, 30 years.
And on top of which,
And
they're very
underneath
busy.
this tree is a root system. And I think there are 7, you can argue 8, 7 major roots that have to be expressed. And we can cover them as we go through the talk, perhaps. But in principle, from that seed, from that acorn, you've got your genetics. And then in the soil around it, you've got your nutrients, you hope. And you hope you don't have lots of pesticide and toxins, because the next root is your gut. It's going to take things in. And if they're not there, your tree's going to be deficient. And then we go through good and bad habits and exercise and psychospiritual stuff, which is more, I think, an area that you and your listeners, readers, watchers are going to be interested in. But then we get down to things like mitochondria. It's a very interesting way of looking at it, because it means that somebody comes in with a particular problem and a branch full of little minor symptoms, but the real problem is down here in the roots. And it might not even be your problem. It may be that the soil is toxic, or the soil doesn't have its nutrients in. So in explaining that to somebody, as I've shot off on the tangent as I do, once you get that across, it starts to fit into place. And people go, okay, thank you. Yes, that might be why I'm in pain. I've got the shakes, my vision's deteriorating, and there is nothing wrong with it.
I remember going to a practitioner. It's actually in Harley Street, a long time ago, with a problem I had with my hip. And he asked me to walk across the room and then walk back. And then he asked me to take my sock off and started looking at my ankle. And I said, it's not my ankle, it's my hip. He said, no, it's your ankle. I said, it's hurting in my hip. He said, no, it's your ankle. The problem's your ankle. He was absolutely right.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was absolutely
There's
right.
a structural example.
Yeah. So look, the audience for Metaconscious Leaders is very much people in business, and leaders today are operating in an increasingly challenging environment for a plethora of reasons, whether societal, political, environmental, social. And although these things may be global, they may be outside of the business, they all impinge in the business, and they increase the pressure on leaders in their decision making and policy making that they need to be doing and making. And of course, this impacts on health and well-being of leaders as well as those who are being led. What are you noticing more about people's health in general that could be connected with a bigger picture at play in society and at large at the moment?
Okay, well, let's start that with a support of your reason for asking that question. And although this is a somewhat, I suppose, anecdotal way of saying it, it's pretty close to the truth. But the Americans are now publicizing that by the age of 60, 60% of people will be on 6 drugs. That in itself is, a shame. It's frightening when you take children. And if you get to look at the rate of children at the age of 18, you've got 50% of them are on 1 or more drugs. Now, we're not going to get political here, because there are pros and cons for nearly every politician. But the leaders of the health movement in the States, the leaders at the highest end, are making a very big push, are they not, towards colorants in foods, additives and compounds in drugs, the adjuvants, if not the actual other processes being used in vaccinations and drug treatments like mRNA drug treatments. And they're questioning where the evidence of safety has come from. And if we consider the concerns that these world leaders, who are not everybody's cup of tea, but if we listen to what is being considered, then there is something not quite right. And it is those conditions that we are seeing more of. Things like malnutrition, because the goodness in food is not there once it's been processed. The toxicity in food, the toxicity in our air, in our water. Whoa, do you really want to go swimming near an outflow pipe here in the British Isles? How are we actually managing psychologically? What pressures do we have that we know how to relieve? If you're worried about the mortgage or about the money to pay, that is a constant, ever existing, 24/7 concern. So what do we expect to see? We expect to see unexplained tummy issues because there isn't a drug that will compensate for a lack of digestible foods. There are no drugs that are thought of except up here to take the spasm out of a gut that's become inflamed by a toxin that goes in. When that deficiency gets through the body, what happens if we are lacking, say, B12? Because the push to be vegan did not match that individual's genetics. An Eskimo being asked to live off vegetables alone is going to struggle. The humans are very adaptable, but they may well be genetically incapable. 80% of South Asia are lactose intolerant. You can't ask them to live off a Swedish style, high dairy dietetics. They're not high dairy, but necessarily a lot of cheese, a lot of milk is what I'm getting at. So we've got genetics and we've got the way that people are living. And that, of course, is going to lead to deficiency, become B12 deficiency. These small parts of cells called mitochondria that make energy are not going to function very well. They'll not function very well for a lot of other reasons. In fact, there's not one root problem that we might have that won't influence the mitochondria. We've got to be able to recognize that I've got to be able to recognize that to answer that question. Because when we come through the physical issues, they've basically got lots of letters, haven't they? They're MEs, they're CFSs, they are IBS. I've lost track of the psychological abbreviations that are being given now. And I have to ask my patients sometimes, they look at me, particularly the younger ones, well, hold on, aren't you the expert? I go, well, yes, but frankly, the problem's down here. It's not what they've labelled you up here. So a lot of that. Now, we've got a widespread acceptance of ADHD now. My days at school, your days at school, they were funny kids. And people who didn't mix and blend and so on. They were fairly few and far between. And they probably were slightly autistic on the ASD spectrum. Autistic spectrum, have an autistic spectrum disorder. They may well have been ADHD. I think there are more now. And we are labeling people there because miraculously, some of the drugs that didn't work so well for ADHD are now showing up in studies to be very good with ADHD. So there's a reason. Oh, hold on. If we can get more of that illness, then we can sell more of that drug. So let's make sure that we are all absolutely testing everybody. And we'll keep the bar a little bit low because you don't want to miss anyone. Because once we've recognized that, we got that. But whether it's screen time, whether it's just a lack of being close to nature, whether it is the diet, whether it is the psychology of what we can now see and watch, whether it is the fear that is portrayed in the media, whatever it is, it's hitting everybody of every age. So a lot more depression, a lot more anxiety, a lot more sleeplessness, all hit with drugs. No, not all hit with drugs. There are many are hit with drugs. Try and go and see a counsellor on our through our beloved, and I mean that sincerely, NHS. And there just aren't enough counsellors. So you can see somebody for 6 weeks. Then if you're really bad, they may take you on for another 6. Then you're done. And then you've got to go and find 70 or 80 quid a whack for a consultation. Well, where are you going to go? What are you going to do? You're going to turn to gizmos and gadgets, perhaps? Good. Some of them are very good. We may touch upon vagal nerve treatments and calming treatments, because some of these machines are able to trigger within us a neurological pattern that resembles those who meditate well. If you're not a good meditator, you may actually reach neurological and brainwave patterns similar to a master meditator. And whether master meditators can take that into their life is a different matter. When confronted, particularly if in charge of a large business and so on. And if they can, they can. That's great. Most can't. So these vagal nerve toners are very useful. I'm shooting off on a tangent a bit here, Greg, but you are seeing just through your neighbours and friends and dinner parties what we are seeing when the person says, I've had this for months. I've had this for years.
Yeah, interesting. Can we just stand back a little bit for a moment, because we'll revisit a number of topics you're talking, and just consider for a moment look at this from an esoteric, energetic, metaphysical perspective, the mind-body connection, and why healthcare is much more than just fixing what's broken, but can also be a gateway to bringing immense vitality and energy to life. You know, sometimes we think we're healthy, but then we do something. I mean, I'm talking for myself. I think I'm healthy at one point, and then I do a few things, or I just start eating differently. I'll start exercising, and I go, "Wow, I'm feeling so much better. I didn't realize I could feel this good." Now, I realize that you consider medicine to be a lot more than biochemistry. How do you perceive, or how would you summarize from your perspective that, let me call it, metaphysical aspect of healthcare and healing? Is there a spiritual component, an energetic component that science hasn't yet found a complete explanation for?
That last bit throws me a little bit, because I am a frontline practitioner, not delving deeply into the science, and so quite what is around the corner, or how researchers may well be traveling down that route, I'm going to leave to another day and a little bit more homework. The term metaphysical is also quite a difficult one, I think, if you're talking about practical functional medicine. But I mean practical, because we've got to act on it, and it's not something that is a theoretical concept that we can sit around dinner and if we work out what that is, we're all going to feel better. But if we take metaphysical from the point of view that it is meta alongside or above the physicality of medicine, I think there's an awful lot we don't really understand. Whenever I meet a physicist, I don't usually, they're not really my crowd of entertainers, but I ask the question, can you tell me what magnetism is? I know it's a force, I did my physics at A level, I know the principles, I know where to stick it into certain equations, but actually, what is it that gets these two magnets to go boom? What's in the middle? Is it a little hook? Has one got a hole and the other one's got a hook and it pulls it together? And they start talking to me about energy wavelengths and bands. I go, yeah, okay. So let's talk about electromagnetic force, right? And magnetic force. But what actually is it? What is now? This is, I think, the most fundamental question. Gravity. If I jump up, I get pulled down. What is it that's pulling me down? If it's a gravitational force, fine. Understand that. What's on my foot that is being pulled down? What's between it that is sucking me in? It's not a vacuum. I'd understand. Positive and negative charges. Positive charges repel. Look at what's in the way. What is it? Can you show me that molecule? And of course, we all know that every neuroscientist is unable to explain what consciousness is. We have no idea where it is, what it is. I think it's Rupert Sheldrake, who at least one of the people that wrote about it that I read about. The consciousness might well be out here, for all we know. We assume it's in here. I find that difficult because of my understanding of neurotransmitters. But this principle has from the get-go baffled me, and it still does. And I hope somebody listening will actually write and say, you're an idiot. This is what happens. You just haven't read the right things. So there is this force. Now, some people will recognize it in different ways, or they won't be open to it. What happens if I know that grandma's going to call? What was it that made me say, oh, grandma's going to call any minute, Mum? What is it that makes a dog, again, another well-tried experiment, what makes a dog go to the door when their master is coming home? Not just because it's the same time of the day. A dog will often go when the master is half a mile away. They've done experiments on it. They've done studies using prayer on knee surgery in Italy. A surgeon said, okay, it's a time of religion and belief. Let's see whether this works. And BMJ published it 20 odd years ago. I've got the reference somewhere, I'm sure. They got people with knee surgery to be prayed for. Local hospital, I think it was 10 or 12 people with knee surgery. 6 people's first names were put out and asked to be prayed for. The other 6, they were told they were there. Let's pray for them as well, but we don't know their names. It's a really small number and has not been repeated. But it was statistically significant, if you can have it on such a low number, that the people who were prayed for had no problems or nothing in comparison to, you'd hope none of them would have any problems in an Italian hospital, but you get complications. So, you can go on talking about these factors. So you've got this energy flow that we don't really recognize, and yet we have it. And it is a strong one. And mums really express it well. I've got this BAO, Bachelor in the Art of Obstetrics, after my name because it was an area of medical interest. But it was surprising how going through my training and my early years where I took a specialist interest in it, how mums knew what was happening to their child, sometimes before the child knew it was going to happen. Let's have it sometimes, but not quite so much. So is that a hormonal issue? Is there an estrogen connection there or not? And I think we walk into a room and we see someone on the other side of the room, we're attracted to them. I think they put out an energy. We have a receiver that says, I want to talk to you. But somebody with exactly the same look and complexion over there, thank you, not for me. And particularly when it comes to the long-term male-female, female-female, male-male attraction on a different level. So I think there is this big issue that science hasn't looked at. And that comes into health. So long-winded, but the point I'm making is, I think in answer, there is a metaphysical aspect. How we get in touch with it, I think, differs depending on the type of person. Because some people will pray their way out of an illness. Others will meditate their way back to health. And you've got to find what it is for that person, without a doubt. I can also argue the other side of that fence, because if we take a concept called psychoneuroimmunology, you may have heard of this. Yeah. Psychology influences the neurology, which through its production of neurotransmitters influences the immune system, because the immune system is ready and waiting to be told to be active. So if we cut ourselves and there's likely to be an infection, neurological impulses will come out. There will be cytokines, interleukins, these inflammatory chemicals. The nerves will pick up on those. And the psyche is influencing the nervous system. Ouch, I'm cut myself. You can numb an area so that the nerves don't work, and yet the knowledge that you have a problem stimulates the immune system's response. So there are many different interactions within the body. But psychoneuroimmunology changed, it's been around for 70, 80 years, but it's changed in the last 5 or 10 to psychoneuroendoimmunology or endocrine immunology, because the same psychology influences the nervous system, which then tells the hormonal system, the endocrine system, what to do. So if I'm frightened, up comes the adrenaline-like drugs, the catecholamines. They will influence the cortisol, the thyroid, the noradrenaline, the serotonin, all these names that people may have heard of. These are all hormones. And that then acts on the whole body. So you have all of that, and it's proven. There's no doubt about it. We don't use it much because we just up here in the trunk of the tree, giving the painkiller or giving the psychoactive medication. I think you could put an S in that, whether you put it at the beginning, which is the spiritual psychoneuroendoimmune system. You could stick it in the middle, perhaps. Perhaps it's our psychology through our neurology creates a perception of spirituality, which alters the hormone system and the immune system. Again, I don't know what science is going on in that field, but yes, what's up there, what's around us, it's the body.
So within the known compass of scientific research and neurological research, there's a very clear link, isn't there, between physical health and mental health? The two of them interact in quite explicit ways. Am I right in thinking that, in saying that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Comes back to that PNI, psychoneuroimmunology. There's very little that can't be correlated. In part, as soon as you've cut yourself or you've got an infection or you are toxic or an organ fails, the body becomes stressed. And once the stress is there, the brain won't recognize how to behave any differently from the stress of a chest infection to there's a lion coming around the corner. I don't know why I looked in the corner of my room because there isn't a lion there, but it's the mimic in me.
Okay. So this physical health, mental health is a key thing that I'd like to bring into the leadership conversation to people in business working under stress. Now, and I think here, awareness, health awareness is of primary concern. It's almost as if awareness is like switching a light on. And when there's light around something, then we can see it and do something about it. Many leaders, though, only think about health when they've burned out. Health is often, should I say, often taken for granted, and many operate in constant overdrive. Many people don't consider healthcare to be something that they need to pay any attention to because they're fit and healthy. So they keep on driving themselves forward and their bodies can carry. I've done it much of my life. I've driven myself. And then I've had a chronic health condition that has literally stopped me in my tracks from working. Nothing wrong with my body other than it said, I'm not doing this anymore. And it was the stress and the pressure that I was putting my body under. So when an executive walks into your clinic exhausted and unwell, what are the first patterns you look for?
Okay. Well, there are several threads to that one. If I'm sitting in front of somebody, they're there usually to ask me how to fix themselves. I think we've covered a little bit of that. They may be sitting in front of me because I have an interest in diagnostics and have devised screening programs. And then we can talk about it. Now, firstly, talking. Tell me about how you are and why you think that you are doing everything right. That is very much a part of a screening program. Whether you recognize it or not, you're being asked, tell me what you do. But really, we're interested in what you're not doing that you should be doing and what you're doing that you shouldn't be doing. So any doctor will take you through that process. If we're going to try and be prognostic in, are you overworking? Are you not taking enough time off? Well, part of it is simply through the questioning. You sleep 4 or 5 hours a night. Okay. Are you refreshed when you do that? And is there any time of the day later on when you can't do it? Are you sure you're not living off adrenaline? You've got those simple questions. You can ask somebody who's perhaps a little bit more rotund than they should be, carrying more weight. And they make light of the fact that I used to play five-side football, but I can't anymore. The injuries, your ankle, these things are happening too much now. I've had to stop. You can hear a lot in the story, and it's often what is not recognized as opposed to what is not said. So you do have to ask. You have to be very aware of people's bad habits. If every evening is a couple of gin and tonics and half a bottle of wine, you've got to ask why. Because that's really not very good for you physically. You know that. Yeah, I do, but I'm fit. I'm healthy, as you were saying. I don't have a problem. I can handle it. I can handle it is really a big a bell. If ever you are asked a question, your thought, your answer is, can I handle it? It's time to go and get screened. The practical side, I'm going to use the analogy of a swimming pool, because there's a shallow end where you just talk to somebody who is a life coach, talk to somebody with a knowledge in nutrition, talk to your gym master, whatever. There's your shallow end, and read a bit about it if you're concerned or interested. There's a middle part, we'll come back to that, but there's a deep part of the pool which you can dive into. You can dive into the deep end, and this is an area that I'm particularly keen on. Because when dealing with people who have very busy lives, tell me that they're happy, they're young, got their 60 employees, and everything's fine, it's worth asking, where do you feel your risks lie? And then there will be those for where it isn't a risk anymore. I've got my X million in the bank and I'm okay. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I'm all right with that. Then you've got those who are absolutely dedicated to either the project, the career, or to their employees. So again, you can then use the deep end to isolate where things may be going wrong, because you can do neurotransmitter testing. Are there too many excitatory hormones? Is your dopamine at the low end? Dopamine is your pleasure and motivational hormone, and it starts from a protein, tyrosine, an amino acid. And the more you have to work to make it, the less tyrosine you may have. And tyrosine is an important protein in other functions. So to know a little bit about the amino acid working, most nutritionists will, functional medicine doctors will, and you can start here. Okay, that makes me concerned. So if you keep pulling tendons and ligaments, but your diet's good and your exercise program's good and you do your stretches and your qigong and your tai chi, but why is it still happening? Okay, what's keeping that muscle so taut? So you look at your noradrenaline and adrenaline components, you look at GABA and other relaxing hormones. We've also got to recognize that we are very aware that anxiety, pressure, so I differentiate the two. Anxiety is I do what I do and I'm not that happy about it. And pressure is I do what I do and I'm okay with it. But the physical effects are still possibly the same. You may have much better coping mechanisms, therefore it's just pressure to you. But in fact, for those that don't have a coping mechanism, it's the stress. But the actual underlying biochemical change of only sleeping 5 hours, not exercising enough, eating the wrong things, having your 3-4 shots of alcohol a night, which is just normal. This is a big push on the neurotransmitters. Depression, anxiety, these are inflammatory conditions. If the brain doesn't get all that it needs, it may well start to trigger inflammation. The question whether somebody who's depressed has inflammation or whether somebody who's inflamed has depression is certainly a two-way event. But people who have diseases that create inflammation have a higher rate of anxiety and depression. So the clever bods in neuroscience had a look, and they found that actually we can say that depression is a neurological inflammatory response. And those who like to play these games, you can go on to Google, you'll get millions of sites, go into Google Scholar and type in inflammation. And then after that, type in depression and see the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of papers written on. And then change the word to anxiety and see what happens. Change it to autistic spectrum. Change it to ADHD. Then you can start looking at whether or not chronic infections can settle in the neurological system. And you'll find they do, from streptococcus, which causes all sorts of issues, PANS and PANDAS, an acronym for psychiatric inflammatory conditions. The process by which we can identify someone, therefore, from the story, from a wide range of tests. The conventional tests and conventional screening is very much a flash view of how you are now, because it's trying to capture you once you've got your disease. Early detection. Whoa, we're really good at it now. 1 in 4 black men are going to have prostate cancer. get yourself checked, scan this, answer these questions. Oh, better come in for a blood test. And that's great because we've got treatments for that. We've got treatments for enlarged prostates if that's why your PSA is raised. And look, we'd be grateful to us because if we catch your prostate cancer early, you won't influence your longevity. But wouldn't it be great if we could take people back a step and have a look at their lifestyle? And very importantly now, their genes. If I may just divert, well, I think I've answered your question, but let's just quickly talk about genomics. The genome of the human being was brought forward in 2003, and we have now got 20 odd years of knowledge. And these genomic tests are becoming more and more accurate because we are beginning to recognize what natural compounds, what activities, what patterns of lifestyle, what our psychological patterns are, all influence the genes that we have. We also know that we evolved with certain plants. Whether we ate those plants directly or we ate them through the animal that we ate, who'd eaten the plant, we were getting the nutrients. If we were well fed, then we survived. If there was a mechanism, which there is, by the gene recognizing that that food is here, we're okay, stay where you are, we didn't wander off. We then started to have a relationship with our bowel flora and their genes. And their genes were happy when they had the right food going in. When they were happy, they produced their waste product. We recognized the waste product, and our nervous system developed a recognition of the nervous tissue, of the bowel flora's waste product. We have genes that control the nervous system that have receptors that recognize the presence of bacteria that tell us we're in a healthy environment. If you become unhealthy, go into an unhealthy environment, take in a toxin, the bowel bacteria die off. Those chemicals then don't come out. Our nervous system goes, oh, there's something missing here. So the Clostridia species that we carry in our gut, the enterococcal species that we carry in our gut, tell the nervous system that we're okay. If we're okay, our stress response says we're okay. Then we come back to that higher plane. Are we then, in moments of peace and calm, more likely to be looking at, okay, what is there? What is up there? Does that matter? And yes, it does. I think we talked about that a bit earlier. There's a big connection. So we're right down to the molecule of a nutrient in the soil, influencing our bowel bacteria, our symbiote, our friend, influencing our neurological pattern and or our spirituality. So tell me there isn't a holistic effect here. So when the stressed individual with a huge responsibility of leading a project, leading a company, leading hundreds of people in their career and their livelihood, and the subconscious pressure, a lot of psychotic people seem to be at the top of politics at the moment, but majoritively, people who get to the top and bring people with them have got the whole in their mind. And I've just said it's in their mind that they've got to keep that aspect healthy, but it starts with these 7 roots.
So, Rajendra, in your experience, what are the 2 most common causes of health challenges for leaders? I'm thinking, it may be stress, for instance, or it may be diet, or it may be whatever.
I'm going to say, are you happy? Okay. Because that covers so many areas of when you say, is it stress or not? And then the second one would be, are you moving? How does that fit? You're only giving me 2, because I can say, well, diet is so important, and everything you might read about in every magazine, every newspaper, and every health practitioner you see. But I think if you can encompass that, because depressed people don't move. They don't want to go out. They're sad. They're not happy.
Interesting.
Moving, the chances are, even if you're going to the gym, because there's an entire outside that can be a wonderful gym. And people underestimate brisk walking. I think it's, if you can get into up to 6-7 hours of brisk walking in, for the majority of people, and we know for whom it won't work because we can do their genomic testing and have a look at what their exercise levels should be. But for the majority of people, just that amount of walking a week And if you can't do it every day, go for a 2-hour walk at the weekend. So movement. Are you moving? And see how somebody reacts. Well, what do you mean am I moving? Yeah. No, you can expand on that. And are you happy? Are you stressed? It's a really difficult one. As I said, are you stressed or are you pressured? Are people happy when they're stressed? Yes, they are. So it's out of two questions. It's not going to obviously come up with the answer. But if you're not happy, you've got to change what you're doing. And not happy may indicate poor diet. People forget that alcohol and cigarettes are depressants. They depress brain function. And that means that you don't worry so much. So everyone says alcohol.
I have, though, come upon people who say that they've reached a point, or they reached at some point a time in their life when they realized that they had been pretending to be happy, that they weren't actually happy. So things are not always apparent, are they?
No, they aren't apparent. But when you've done this for 40 years, it becomes clearer. And in fact, you don't have to be that. You have to be aware as a practitioner at any level. And I do think that this concept of humanity is moving away from medical care. I don't like to use the word medicine because there's a lot of remarkably good medicine. But people, consultants, doctors of all levels, nutritionists, physiotherapists, whatever their skill set and speciality is, I think that we're lacking as a planet and as a species compassion. And when you do that, you don't recognize when somebody says, yes, I'm fine, I'm absolutely happy. Now, if they don't realize it, that's fine. But then if they don't know that they're not happy and they're not complaining of anything, unless they're going to do things like neurotransmitter screening, and unless we're going to have some element of clue that it's not okay to pull a muscle every time you play tennis. So that shouldn't be happening. So don't tell me everything's okay. It isn't. But then you wouldn't come to see me if somebody had an answer to why you kept injuring yourself. Recurrent infections, chest infections, urinary tract infections. That doesn't necessarily have to mean movement and happiness. You can be 80 and your immune system can go down. And that's an aging process. Can we improve that? Yes, we can. We can resurrect some activity in the immune system, regardless of the conventional attitude. So nothing much we can do, because it's not a drug that does it. But the white blood cells can be stimulated by bovine thymus, for example, this gland that we have it sort of dies off by the time we're in our late teens. It's done its job. It's set up the immune system. But there is still activity in there, some there, but mostly around the body, that stimulates the immune system, keeps them fit and healthy. The bone marrow is constantly churning them out. And where do we start with this, or end with this as a question? Coming back to that point, are you happy? Are you moving? Yes, the majority of people will recognize that, and sometimes often it touches really in here, because no one's ever asked them.
It makes complete sense. It makes complete sense to me, because if you ask me both those questions, sometimes I would answer one positively and the other, I'd be unaware of, for instance. And that alone indicates that, it's not quite all is well. So I was pleased to put you on the spot there with only two suggestions on a health map.
Two answers.
Always a little bit ridiculous, but I'm going to give you another one, which is,
okay.
I see a lot of people around. There are a lot of wearables around. There are a lot of people who are tracking this and that and about their health, whether it be their heartbeat, their blood pressure, their this, their that. What are 3 metrics that you would say are non-negotiable in terms of tracking the health and well-being of an executive in a demanding role?
Yeah. The first one that comes to mind is sugar control. And that's in itself tricky, because sugar, we know about sugar from eating too much sugar raises your blood sugar levels. We then also know that insulin rises to push the blood sugar levels down by getting sugar into the cells, for the reason that we eat sugar, to activate the mitochondria and provide energy. But unfortunately, too much then goes into the fat cells. Knowing beforehand what your sugar levels are doing is very valuable. There is now a commonplace test, the HbA1c test. It's a type of hemoglobin that increases the more sugar there is around in the body. You can have a look at your blood sugar levels, but you're controlling that because you're still in control of your insulin. And you have insulin receptors. And so long as they aren't burnt out by just too much sugar, they will recognize the insulin. They'll open up cells. They'll get fat storage being made. Everything's fine. But the HbA molecule, the hemoglobin molecule, will start to rise. So now, if you go along, you will have a test, not for your sugar levels, because that's just too late, but you can look at your HbA1c. So I think, again, 3 put on the spot, desert island tests, that would be one. From a wearable, you made mention of that. It's incredible what can be isolated from that and then transmitted across the world for a specialist to have a look at. But there's something called pulse wave velocity. The pulse wave velocity is the measurement of how an artery is opening and closing, because the stiffer it gets because of clogging up or tension, then the pulse wave velocity changes. And there are specialized machines. I'm very fond of one called the arteriograph. And a lot of my patients in for screening and as we're talking about high levels stress and responsibility, people in that position, the arteriograph is a really useful one. It's a very sophisticated blood pressure cuff. It's got receptors at either end that measures the bounciness of the brachial, the arm artery up here. It then has an ability that when the heart beats and it hits that part of the compression, it meets a wall, blood bounces back like a wave on a beach coming up. So a big wave comes up, goes back, next wave tries to come up, but it meets the receding tide. And this little computer tells us so many things: central blood pressure, fitness of the heart, the actual capability of the heart, the blood flow within the heart. But pulse wave velocity, one of the measurements, not only tells us about the bounciness of the artery, it also corresponds to 93% equivalent to what an angiograph does, the one where we inject dye into the artery and we watch the heart and see the arteries in the heart, the coronary arteries fill. Now, that's a very expensive, very invasive test. You're in hospital for the day, and the actual test itself exposes you to a lot of x-rays. And this bench-borne in any clinic, if they had them, arteriograph done properly, 93% correlation. So I think that's a pretty good one, because that would tell me if my arteries are too tense, and then I can decide whether that's coming from tension or whether it's because, well, my dad died at CI from a heart attack and Uncle Betty did the same, whether or not my arteries are now clogging up. Because knowing that when you're 40, because your arteries at 40 are aged 50, you can make your changes. And it's a good one there.
Are arteriographs available off the shelf, or do you have to go to a clinic for these?
You have to go to clinics. There are practitioners. They're very few, I'm afraid. And I don't know why. I know they're used by, well, say I know, anecdotally, it is told by the manufacturer of the arteriograph that I use, that I'm not going to mention which hospital group, but they use it in their research. That research is good enough for them to govern their drug development. It's part of it. There's going to be lots of other aspects. So there's no doubt about its usefulness, but you don't really want it on a GP's desk, because what would happen if at the age of 40, you tell somebody your arteries are going to be clogging too quickly? You've really got to change your lifestyle, because your cholesterol might be fine, because cholesterol is a very, very small part, almost a branch when it comes to the clogging of arteries. And what do? Well, we've got this $300 billion a year budget for statins. And so we certainly don't want something down here telling you 20 years or 10 years or 5 years before you're going to need them, or that your lifestyle actually is not a very good one for you. Yeah, you don't want that. because that's too expensive. So I think that's it. It's I don't think anyone's going to blame me. I'm not bringing the profession into disrepute. I hope not. I will see if anyone particularly disagrees with me. Many might. So yeah, you can go online and read about the arteriograph, and you can go online and read about other similar pulse wave velocity, and you can measure these. You can measure your pulse wave velocity. It's in the fitness watches, the Fitbits, I think they're called, and it's just the accuracy of what might be on your wrist as opposed to the ones that, of course, come into play when people want to go through a full screen, or I'm concerned about. I'm struggling a little bit about the third metric because I hadn't really thought where I might go with it. I quite like the concept of neurotransmitters, because if we're looking at the stress response, and I've got somebody who's simply answered the question, are you moving? And they say, yes, this is how much I do a week, or no, I'm not doing enough. So I can gauge that. I mean, you could do all sorts of structural metric measurements. And again, back to these fitness watches, they're excellent. And if they'll also tell you how much you sleep, I think that's great too. So if I was going to cheat and say, well, have one of those as well, please, of course, that covers plenty. But otherwise, if it was going to be for, I'll use your term, a leader, as if a leader has necessarily more stress than the person who comes in overnight to clean the building. The stress activity may be different, but the actual stress pattern may very well be the same. Suppose for the leader, those who can afford getting an arteriograph is not a bad idea. Getting your neurotransmitters is not a bad idea. Having a pulse wave and a neurotransmitter, and everybody checking their sugar control. And if you don't want to put funds into a belly measurement, if your belly is larger than your hips, you're probably moving towards, or you already have something called insulin resistance. And if you've got insulin resistance, your biochemistry may be fine. It may look fine or be within the range, but you are probably heading towards insulin resistance. And insulin resistance just means that your sugar levels come up, your insulin levels come up to bring them down. Everything's working fine in there because it's not just insulin. There's ghrelin, there is leptin, there is cortisol. There are so many different aspects, GLP-1 and these new injections that have their place, but we don't know what's going to happen long term and should therefore perhaps be, as they currently are, only if you need them. And yet their accessibility is such that so many people use them. And gosh, it does make such a difference to so many people. I have nothing against it at all. And I do want to stress this. I'm not an alternative practitioner. Nor am I, of course, a specialist in any conventional view. But I'm here on the fence looking at hopefully the best in both worlds. So there you go. Pulse wave, sugar, and neurotransmitters.
And a Fitbit.
And a Fitbit, but that doesn't count.
Yeah. So we've been talking about health as if it's a necessity and desirable, and of course it is, because it makes us feel better and so forth. But I'd also like to give a shout out here as well for people who don't have good health, and even who suffer or have suffered through their lack of health, and despite it or because of it, seem to find inspiration and insight that enables them to reach amazing heights of performance or contribution, or do creative things that are quite extraordinary. In your life, have you come upon people who, and maybe you can't name names, you might be able to, but do you see examples of people who, despite their suffering or because of their suffering, find in that a drive, a purpose, a reason for performance that they wouldn't otherwise be able to achieve?
Without a doubt. And you're quite right. I won't be mentioning names, but people can be faced with a condition that they're likely to expect to die from. And those who have had strong spiritual beliefs, not necessarily religious, let's say Buddhism, we can discuss whether it's a religion or not, but if you take the spirituality and the best part of every religion, that spiritual aspect, the ability to pass, to go from one plane to another, to stop, whatever your belief might be, is resoundingly influencing on anybody in the healthcare industry. And it will happen to so many people who aren't when you hold the hand of a loved one who dies and you hear that last breath leaving the body, and there's that. There was a wonderful scientific test. I have no idea whether this has ever been repeated, but they completely enclosed dead bodies in a completely uh, uh, impenetrable sealed box, glass box. I don't know, it's glass now I say that. I've just perhaps got a vision of it, like some horror movie. And they kept it on a highly sensitive scale. And this was quite some time ago. So our scales now may well be even better at this. And then they monitored the weight of the individual at the moment of death. And it invariably dropped. It's a fraction of a millimeter, but nothing can get out. It was dark, of course. That's why it is. It can't have had windows on it. It must have been dark because you can't have light transmit, because light carries, well, it does, it carries a weight. It's a quanta. I've gone off on a different tangent there, Greg. You have to remind me what your question was. Oh, the influence of people. I think it was that you're up. How their resilience is. Now, those who don't have strength leading up to an illness do less well than those who learn to be resilient through their illness, who do better than those who just can't come to terms with it. So there's countless occasions, but I can't imagine any one not somebody who is ill, who is resilient, and working with them and not working with them. The emotion is completely different. Experience and 40 years of it makes the difference to my ability to answer that. I particularly notice it in colleagues who have been through depression and work as counsellors, people who work in cancer, who've had cancer. There is such a swing simply because of the empathy and the ability for them to get their ideas across and to capture that person's interest, because that person and the therapist know each other at a much deeper level. So, yeah, I think that there is a huge connection between learning and from an illness and going into an illness having learned. And
So for
I think
me,
from a
so
young age.
yeah, so for me, whilst I aspire to good health all the time, there's so much that I can learn from aches and pains, from illnesses and challenges, health challenges that I receive, that actually are very valuable guides to me, very valuable indicators about how I'm living my life, or about how I'm perceiving my life, how I'm approaching it mentally. So my intelligence of my body to communicate with me, with my conscious awareness, is incredible. And
Yeah.
so whilst we may aspire to great good health, when we don't have it, it's not all bad news. It's maybe just a message that's good news in the end, because it's going to put us on the right track.
But if we were to expand that you gave me those two choices, and I said, are you happy? Are you moving? Let's throw one more in, which is, have you time? And it's a question that it raises, but what do you mean by that? Do you feel in your life you are constantly saying there's no time? Because for that simple question tells me immediately whether this person is meditating. I don't have to ask that question, because of course meditation doesn't have to be how it is so envisaged. You can meditate just lying on the grass, and you don't have to do the breathing bit. You can just look up at the sky and just watch it for a while, and you will shift into certain physiological changes, partly from grounding or earthing, because the positive charge around the earth pulls out the negative charges and helps rebalance the body. This earthing concept, the tree huggers, absolutely scientifically validated, particularly if you've got inflammatory conditions creating free radicals. And free radicals are little particles that go around pinching a positive or a negative charge from different places. If it's constant in the bloodstream and you keep pulling out a positive or negative charge from the lining of an artery, it's like pulling the render off a wall. Eventually, it'll go. What's that? What do you put between bricks? Cement.
Cement, yeah.
Just pick away at the cement. Eventually, that brick will fall out, and this is what happens. And then along comes the cholesterol, goes back in to fix it. And cholesterol, by the way, can't be good or bad. I hope everybody's learnt that lesson by now. You've got cholesterol. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just cholesterol. It's how it's carried that is good or bad for health. But the molecules that carry it, the low density, and you've got high density is sort of the bundleness of it. So high density hasn't got bits sticking out that trap other things. This is the way I describe it. So you've got high density lipoprotein that takes the cholesterol to where the damage is, pops it in, and then goes away. Low density sticks to the cholesterol that it's brought there, and then it's got these prongs like that. These are sort of electrical charges, then pick up bits that go past in the bloodstream. And then that sort of makes that area start to build up inside the artery. A little bit of physiology there. So, but cholesterol, I knew there was a reason why I was saying it's cholesterol, is the starting point that makes cortisol, your stress hormone. So if you are stressed, if you're worried, if you're undersleeping, if you've got infections, if you're tired, if you don't like your work, if you're frightened by the bank manager, if you don't want to go home, all these different stresses, they are going to demand cortisol to balance out the adrenaline and the noradrenaline and the physical responses. And it's all coming from cholesterol. So cholesterol goes up. You ask somebody, have you got time? And they find time. They go, okay, I see your point. Even if it's watching a comedy before they go to bed, just something. Because laughter just alters that neurotransmitter. Being happy makes such a difference, even if it's just momentarily. And that's where a hug comes in. And we've known this as we evolved, because when you hug someone, you produce oxytocin. Oxytocin is the breast letdown milk. Well, it's very clever of evolution to have made it such that the nuisance of having a baby on the breast is actually a pleasurable thing. Well, it should be. And you've got to have time for that when you're feeding. So anyway, lots of tangents.
Okay, so all good tangents though, all great stuff. So companies, if you had an executive asking you what he could do back in his company to encourage, to provide a degree of health support, call it, to staff members and other executives, what would you suggest?
If I had the CEOs of the top FT 500 here, I would say I would expect you all to have your medical directors. I would expect you all. I'm sure there are bigger structured screening programs for those that come into the directors' board meetings, and then there may be nothing at all a first year employee. I don't find that very much, actually, to be honest. I think big companies now are those that can afford. In times as finances get harder, the simple aspect of popping a couple of points onto national insurance, employers' national insurance, I did think it's going to hit so many smaller companies, but the bigger ones as well, because I wonder if they're going to continue their health insurance policies. And indeed, I found that that's not the case. But if I could say, what you're doing now is absolutely excellent. Thank you. You have got this flash view screening. So if somebody is unwell, you will spot it. You're spotting it, from my point of view, for the betterment of the individual. But from your financial director, you're doing it to make sure that person, right, okay, he's not going to be with us in 2 years. That's being dramatic. Let's get the next person moving up, or you've got to do X, Y, and Z because you're going to get ill and you're a vital cog because you're commanding 100 people. Without you, that will slip and so on. So that's good. Most big companies have a nutritionist on board. Not a dietitian, by the way, very different species, but a nutritionist, somebody who is knowledgeable about the function of cellular metabolism, recognizes what is right and wrong, can individualize someone. That nutritionist should perhaps be able to read genomic reports. Now, some genomic reports, the one I use, is very user-friendly. It goes to America. It takes about a month to come back. I don't know if that's because they're so busy or that's the time it takes to analyze the genome from a cheek swab, nothing more. But that will tell you whether you do it on a baby that's just been born or a 90-year-old who probably isn't going to be with us next year. Whatever the age, what the genetic behavior pattern is, not only for lifestyle activity, but also for eating and food. So try and keep people well. My daughter works in a big production company. They have very healthy food available. They do not have unhealthy food available. And they encourage that. And that's a huge one. Get that particular machine that vends the quick fix chocolate and the sodas out of reach. We've got to stop doing that. Simple. But a good nutritionist, a good life coach, if that's the correct word to use, somebody who recognizes the good and bad things that we do. It is surprising how little education there is for the general public about what good and bad is. And those that are the big frustration is not really for me at the board level. It is down here at the real broad end of the pyramid, when you can't give your family of 5, 2, 3 kids an apple a day, because for that £5 you can go and get a chicken bucket. And for the politician who quite rightly said, I can get by and I can eat on 39 pence a day, or whatever it was, the huge lack of compassion is something that I was going to bring in to play in this talk if I got the opportunity. So I'll use it now. The lack of compassion that our leaders, you use the word leader in your creation here, Greg, but the compassion in our world leaders just seems to be absent. I think it's been absent a long, long time. Perhaps it's been absent since Caesar and Alexander the Great, but it's certainly not here now. And we seem to be quite happy to just brush it aside. And I think that's a huge one. So bringing in compassion. And bringing in compassion brings us up to the mind. So big companies have counselors. They have schools. I forget the correct term. Schools have people that you can go to if you're feeling stressed. Some of those aren't qualified. They don't. They're there. They're shoulders to cry on. But I think you can certainly put that into place within a company. I suspect they're all there. So what I think is missing, which is perhaps what you were hoping I'd get to quicker, but I wanted to express that I think many people do so much good already, is moving from flash view conventional screening to functional screening. And if you get stool tests done, if you get hormonal balance tests done, neurotransmitter tests done, if you're concerned about somebody, get neuroinflammatory tests done. Somebody's flagging. They're saying, oh, no, a GP says it's chronic fatigue. Get a mitochondrial study done. And from these 4 or 5 main aspects of screening, you may have to go off and do other screens. If you do them each individually and each one has to be reported individually, they cost more because the person has got to report them. Do them as a bundle, and you can bring the costs down, because you can look at all of the different things at once. And you'll remember my days, Greg, in the diagnostic clinic. That's what we did for 10 years. And who asked for it to be set up? Well, a leader of industry. And that just goes to show that this isn't anything new, although I think you and I were involved in the very first movements in this field, in pulling the strings together. And I can go on because it's worthwhile having a good multi-trained physical therapist there, somebody who knows enough to say, you need osteopathy, you need chiropractic, you need acupuncture, you need Tai Chi. direct people to it. And we go over to the Far East, and you've got Japan and China, Taiwan, Vietnam coming down into that Southeast. You go to work, and the first half hour is Tai Chi. And if people don't think about going for a walk for an hour before they go to work and then see how much better they feel at work, even if they're a bit tired when they get home, they're tired because they've expended energy, including physicality, which makes you sleep better. So there are so many different things, and it rather depends on if someone comes to see me for that sort of thing. It's not just me, any functional medicine doctor, and frankly, any good functionally medical nutritionist is going to say much the same. Tell me what you do. Let's find the gaps. Do you want to stay in the shallow end where it's just stuff you do? Do you want to go into the deep end where you're going to pay for it? But there it is. But the cost of those 5 tests that I mentioned, it's less than a body scan. It's less than a full body scan. And a full body scan is going to tell you that you do or you don't have a lump where it shouldn't be right now. But it will not tell you where you're going to be next week, next month, next year. Whereas if you combine the functional medicine aspect and you find your bowel flora is out of whack, your cortisol's down in its boots, as a woman you have estrogen dominance, as a male you have testosterone deficiency, if you find your neurotransmitters are imbalanced, if you find you've got neuroinflammatory response, any one of those, we can shift it and potentially move you away from anxiety, depression. And I haven't started to talk about medicine, deep, dark neurological issues, but I would like to know a little bit more about what triggers multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's and motor neurone disease, because I have to work very hard and work at theory when I'm faced by neurological conditions. I then tap things in to think, oh, well, I wonder if that might be it. And into Google Scholar, there are hundreds of papers written on different causes, from pesticides to nutritional disorders and nutritional deficiencies, through chronic infections, through stress response, excess stress response. And they're all there, but there's no drug that fixes it. So they don't get published. And then we come back down to one of the biggest bugbears I have, because as a doctor and as a scientist within being a doctor, there's the concept of randomized controlled double-blind studies. They are the gold standard of testing. Absolutely they are, because they will tell us whether something works or doesn't work. But if you don't do it and you don't have a result, you can't then say the concept doesn't work. There has been no double-blind randomized controlled study. Therefore, we can't say that it'll work or not. No, you can't take vitamin C at the same time as having this particular chemotherapy. There's never been a study done on it. Well, hold on. If you don't do the studies, we can't bring it in with that confidence. But actually, if you look around the world, integrated oncologists are giving vitamin C at the same time as chemotherapy. And they're just saying, it seems to work. So there's something very wrong with the medical concept, and it's reflected by having conventional screening as a be-all and end-all. It's getting better. It's getting better. It's creeping into the consciousness of GPs. I think the COVID issue and the vaccine hesitancy that there was around, right or wrong, I'm not commenting on that, has made doctors think, okay, hold on. I wasn't allowed to sit with a patient through COVID. I'm talking as a GP here, near my acting roles again. I wasn't allowed to see, I had to close my clinic down, my GP practice down. Well, how did that make you feel? Well, I felt really useless. Okay, then what happened to the patient? Well, what I was allowed to do is allowed to talk to them, but I was actually narrowed down because I had to offer them, there's nothing you can do. Wait until you're ill, then call 999, head into hospital. A lot of wards closed in the hospitals, and there were people in ambulances, there still are, outside. And the new hospitals that we paid for haven't been built, as far as I can see. So one as a GP would be thinking, okay, well, what could you do? Well, I had to wait until the vaccines came along, and out I went, and I was given the vaccines, and things started to open up again. Okay, and then what happened? Well, we waited for the order from the chief medical officer to decide what we could and couldn't give. And a lot of that was governed by people in America in particular, because the world tends to follow the pharmaceutical world that way. So, in effect, my patient, after being refused hand-holding, forget the hugging of granny because you may not see her again. I cannot think of a way of expressing a lack of compassion being shown by the human species through those episodes. But in effect, the chief medical officer was actually struggling to treat my patient, who didn't know anything about my patient. But then the chief medical officer who got someone who got knighted for their work, bless them, who worked really hard, actually managed to say that, well, I had to somewhat stick to the rules. So in fact, one could argue that the Minister for Health and the Prime Minister were treating my patient. Now, that got me off on a tangent, and I don't know if you're going to keep that one in. But the point is, here we are. We've got all these conventional attitudes. They go into place. The chief medical officer of every business is going to put into place absolutely everything that should and absolutely should be there. But we really need to go below it, because the people that put it there are the same people that had the Prime Minister treating Mrs. Jones in a poor housing estate in Widnes.
Rajendra, this is an immensely important topic and very fundamental to our entire life experience. A final couple of questions, because you've been extremely generous with your time. When somebody steps into your clinic, what is the one truth that you wish they would already understand about their health?
Okay. Well, one truth that goes a little bit beyond conventional medicine, of course. It goes, frankly, beyond functional medicine, where I would claim to be more of a specialist. It certainly comes within the concept of holistic medicine, but I think it would have to be the illness isn't you. The illness is happening and you are experiencing it, but don't make it you, because there's a lot of you and a lot of time that you aren't having to deal with the illness. You fall off a bike and you lose a leg. Okay, that is a now, and it's hard to escape the now, but it will be patched up and hopefully replaced if it can be, or you'll learn how to get by on a prosthesis. And at some point in the future, it will have happened. And of course, that's not now. So what I'm trying to get at is if I had everybody come in, not with anger, not with irritation, with an understanding that something has gone wrong, and there is a strong possibility that they will be fixed. And if I could deal with people with that attitude, as opposed to, well, what are you going to do to make me better? Because there's very little that any doctor can do, any practitioner of any sort can do. All we can do is we can steer, and we can act through past knowledge, through higher spirits coming through presentation of it. But the person has to take it.
That sounds to me like own your own health, take responsibility for your own health.
It's beyond that, because that's quite harsh, the way you put that. I'm trying to get past that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to say, if you are ill, don't say I am ill, just say I have an illness. And even that, because who am I? Because this body has an illness. Am I my body, or am I my mind? So look, it's got a thorn in my hand. Am I thorned? No, my hand is thorned. I am actually okay. And it's being able to try and get people to separate on your strange question, but which is much more philosophical, theological almost, than it is medical. So again, slightly caught out by wondering how to answer that, and recognizing who your audience might be. If you're going to walk into a doctor's office, try and go in with a positivity. And when the doctor doesn't have an answer for you, try and leave with a recognition that it's not necessarily the doctor's fault. It's not your fault. So what do you do next? And then try and search and open it up. Every spiritual teaching will just remind us that the universe doesn't like a vacuum. You put anger in the place of, well, you just couldn't help. Well, who's going to want to come into that space? And then just say, all right, well, that didn't work. Which avenue do I go down now? And you'll turn around the corner and there'll be a poster of Josephine Bloggs, who's the perfect person for your injury or your disease, and have that faith.
Brilliant. Rajendra, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you so much. Where can people get in touch with you, find out about the work that you do?
Thank you very much. My name, Dr. Sharma, Dr. Sharma, Diagnostics. So it's diagnostic with an S.com. So drsharmadiagnostics.com. And I know you put up certain information on people. So by all means, please put those 3 W's up. And if I can help, I have a system you can email in, but there is an inquiry form if you've got a specific problem, see if I can help or direct somebody to the right place. Or you can come and see me. Yeah, absolutely.
I will put the notes, and all of the links will be in the notes below, so viewers can take a look there and make a connection as they will. So, Rajendra, thank you so much again for your time. Look after yourself, take care, and be well.
Bless you. Bye-bye.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. A lot of really valuable information and interesting insights. To find out more about Dr. Sharma, you can follow the link in the notes below. Please reach out and follow us, like us, share with friends and colleagues, and also leave a note, as it's really useful to know what you're thinking as well. Until next week, thank you for listening and watching. Be well.